Hi, my name is Bibek Adhikari. I am your English instructor. In today's class, we are going to study about the reading portion of Unit 15, that is past and present. So, let's begin. Let's start reading this. I remember, the house where I was born, the little window where the sun came peeping in at morn. He never came a wink too soon, nor bought too long a day. But now I often wish the night had borne my breath away. I remember, the roses red and white, the violets and the lily cups, those flowers made of light, the lilacs where the robin built, and where my brother sat, the laburnum on his birthday, the tree is living yet. I remember, where I used to swing, and thought the air must rush as fresh to swallows on the wing. My spirit flew in feathers then, that is so heavy now, and summer pools could hardly cool the fever on my brow. I remember, the fir trees dark and high. I used to think their slender tops were close against the sky. It was a childish ignorance, but now 'tis little joy to know I am farther off from heaven than when I was a boy. Thomas Hood. Source: The Golden Treasury of Best Songs and Lyrical Poems in the English Language. Now let's study and analyze this poem. This is a poem by the English poet called Thomas Hood, and the title of the poem is Past and Present. Now the poet is trying to remember things from the past and he's trying to compare things with present. So it's more like a comparison kind of poem. So the comparison goes back and forth. Before going on about explaining the poem, I want you to ask you a question. When do you generally go on a swing? What does that mean? Well, that means when do you go back and forth on a swing? Well, the answer is when you are a little kid. Can you name any 5 birds that you have seen in your locality? Of course you can. There are many birds in your locality. But the main thing I want you to ask is, what does the poet remember? Now, sure, he remembers lots of things. Here's our poet, and he remembers quite a lot of things. He remembers the house where he was born. He remembers the little window from where, the sun came peeping in. He also remembers the roses, the violets, red and white. He remembers the lilies, the lilacs, and everything. He remembers the swing. And he used to go back and forth in the swing. And through the air, he used to, rush as fresh to swallows on the wing. And he remembers fir trees, dark and high. So these are the trees. He used to remember those fir trees and were close against the sky. And these things he used to remember as a childish ignorance, but now these little joys are all gone and he is far off from heaven than when he was a boy. So this poem is all about remembering. This poem is about nostalgia. This poem is about remembrance. So this is about nostalgia, and this poem is also about remembrance. The poet is trying to remember the fir trees. The poet is trying to remember the robin, the little bird. The poet is trying to remember the roses, the lilacs, the fir trees. The poet is trying to remember the swing and his old house and the window from where the sun came peeping in. Alright? And the poet remembered quite a lot of things. Now he is quite an old man, and when he was a child he used to do lots and lots of things. Now he is trying to remember everything. The phrase I remember is repeated quite often. What that means is the poet is repeating these lines to make a point. Or it can also be that the poet is trying to, reinforce something. The poet is trying to enforce something. So as the readers, we get to know about that. So the poet is trying to remember something. He says, I remember. He's repeating these words to make a point or to stress a fact. He's also repeating these words to reinforce a statement. What that means is he is saying these words again and again in every stanza to make us, feel that he's really trying to remember something, that he is really being nostalgic, and he is very, sad, but in a good way, and he's trying to think about his childhood. So that's nostalgia. And there's a term in poetry for this, and it's called refrain. Now, refrain is a poetic device where the poet repeats certain words or certain, sentences sometimes to reinforce the fact. Like in the first stanza, the poet says, I remember the house I was born. And in the second stanza, the poet says, I remember the roses red and white. Third stanza, the poet goes something like, I remember where I used to swing. And in the final stanza, the poet says, I remember the fir trees dark and high. So with these rememberings, the poet is trying to create an atmosphere of nostalgia. Another main theme of the poem is the difference between past and present. What that means is there were certain things in the past which the narrator found appealing, still finds appealing, and there are certain things in the present time which the narrator does not like, or is lamenting about the loss. Some things like, past is all sweet, it is all lovely, it is all very happy, while present is all bitter, all ugly and unhappy. But there comes a point where the poet says that all these rememberings of the past were nothing but childish ignorance. What that means is he's trying to say that everything is said, that the past is all sweet, all lovely and happy is nothing but his own ignorance. But again, what he says is something very striking. He says that although it was ignorant and little bit of stupid thing, he calls them little joy. Little joy. Now those were the little joys. Although they were childish ignorance, they were the part of little joys. Now here seems a kind of, contradiction. There's certainly a kind of contradiction going on between the mind, inside the psyche of the poet. So inside the psyche of the poet, what is going on? A kind of contradiction is going on. So what I was trying to say is there seems to be a kind of contradiction inside the psyche of the poet. What that means is there's a tussle between past and present. There's a tussle between past and present. The past and present is hammering inside the mind of the poet, and it's really hard. Sometimes, he remembers everything, the fir trees, the house, every nice thing, and he says everything was very great in the beginning, in the childhood, but now I'm old and I'm farther off from heaven than I was a boy, and now everything is so dreary, so ugly, all bitter and all ugly and all unhappy. And there seems like a kind of bitterness is, creeping up inside the marrow of the poet, or inside the psyche of the poet. So this is the clear example of aging. As people grow up, they become bitter, they become gruesome, they become, they become unhappy in a way. So these are the symbols of aging. Now let us go to the exercise portion. That was the explanation of the poem. I'm sure you can, explain that better than I did, because the room for explanation is always open and you can explain the poem in any way you like. Poems, are the playground where you can go and play, do the little mental exercise and play and play and play. So I'm leaving the explanation part to you, and let's go and solve the questions. The questions are pretty easy. The first one is finding the rhymes. Now in this section you only need to find out the rhymes from the poem. The first one is born. The word born rhymes with mourn. Very good. Easy peasy. Now let's go to sun. The sun rhymes with... Come on. The sun rhymes with... Sun rhymes with mourn. Sun rhymes with born. Another day. The word day rhymes with away. The word set rhymes with yet. So these are very simple rhymes. They are also called regular rhymes or full rhymes. So they are nothing like partial rhymes, because if born is A, mourn is A. If day is B, away is B. If set is C, yet is she. If sun is D, moon or bone is D. So these are very fixed or regular or full rhymes. Very easy. Now let's go to the vocabulary section. The first word is peep. What does peep mean? Peep means to look quickly or secretly. What does the word violets mean? Violets. I think they are some kind of flowers. So these are kind of flowers with small plant with purple or white flowers like that. Very easy. What do you mean by the word slender? Slender means thin or narrow. Very good. What does the word spirit mean? The word spirit means, so it is that part of the person which includes their mind, feeling and character. Alright? So we studied about peep, violets, slender and spirit. Likewise, lily is a kind of flower, laburnum is a kind of game set, something like that. So this is very easy. Now let's go to the question answer section. The question answer section. First question is, who composed the poem? Needless to say, who composed the poem? Who is the poet? So very easy. Who is the poet? Thomas Hood. Thomas Hood. Let's go to a bit logical question. What is the poem about? The poem is about past and present. It is about childhood memories. It is about nostalgia. It is about aging, growing up. It is about growing up. So these are some of the themes of the poem. Let's go to another question. What does the poem remember in first stanza? You can do this. He remembers house and sun and everything. What does the poet remember in the second stanza? This is also easy. He remembers the flowers, the lilacs, violets and all that. Now let's go to the last question. This one seems a bit tricky. Was the poet really closer to the heaven when he was a child? Now this is the tricky question. Was he really close to heaven? Now what does being close to heaven mean? Closer to the heaven. Does that mean he had some heavenly connections? Does that mean he was, getting some divine superpowers from above? No, it's not like that. That does not mean he was, he was getting some magical qualities. He had some superpowers. But what that means is he was really in touch with the nature. Now that connection, that touch has been broken. Was the poet really close to heaven when he was a child? Yes, because he was close to nature and he had many first-hand experiences. First-hand experiences. What that means is he learned about the nature, about the environment with his own mind, with his own experience, with touching, with seeing, with feeling. So using all 5 sense organs, he made a connection, a kind of divine connection, heavenly connection around the nature. So yes, he was close to nature. He had all the first-hand experiences. So we can say that poet was really close to heaven. With this, we have come to the end of today's class and I'm going to give you some homework as usual. Now this is your homework. I want you to write a poem. How lovely is that? I want you to write a poem about your childhood memories. Think about the time when you were a little kid running around and think about the time when you were a little kid running around in small storage. Make sure to include all the sensory details. We have 5 sense organs. So make sure to include all the sense details from touch to hearing to, feeling to taste and all these kind of sensory details. Make sure to include them all. And also it's good to use a rhyme pattern. You can either use the internal rhyme pattern or the line ends. So choose one rhyme pattern, or if you don't want a rhyme pattern, it is not compulsory. You can remove the rhyme pattern and somehow try to write a free verse poem. You can choose a free verse poem, but if you really like to, or you can choose a blank verse poem. Blank verse is a poem in iambic pentameter and it does not rhyme. I guess you know that. If you don't, no worries. We'll study about that in some other class. Now, blank verse is an iambic pentameter and it does not rhyme. But if you really want to write rhyming poems, you can choose any kind of rhyme pattern. It could be ABAB, or it could even be AABB, or sometimes it could be A, no rhyme, and A. Alright? So this is your homework. With this, we have come to the end of today's class. If you have any questions or suggestions regarding this video series, feel free to write us at learning@deerwalk.edu.np. Thank you.